Okay, this post is going to go through the Atheist Experience 25.27, which is from the 4th of July 2021. And it's got Dave Warnock and Jenna Belk, and should be a good one. So let's get straight to it.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. It's Sunday, July the 4th, Independence Day. And with me, I'm Dave Warnock, your host. It says that down there in the picture. But with me today is the lovely Jenna Belk. Hi, Jenna.
Hello, Dave. It's so good to be on with you.
You've had some big news since we last saw you. What's been going on with you?
I just had a baby, that's all.
Oh, that's all. Yeah, just a baby.
An adorable baby.
When are we going to have... What's his name, by the way?
Dexter.
Dexter. When are we going to have Dexter with a headphone on and on this show?
Probably when I have less help at home.
Okay. Well, good to see you.
Excellent news.
Let me get to the announcements really quick. Finally, we want to send a big thank you out to the crew who put this show together every week. Let's see that crew cam. Say hi to our amazing crew.
Hi, crew.
There they are. Oh my, that crew just gets bigger and bigger. It seems like every week. I love it. And they do an amazing job. They keep this thing humming.
Fantastic.
So Jenna, what's anything new other than a baby? We want to get to the calls. Anything going on?
Let's jump in it. We've got Chris in Idaho. And it says, do you want to talk about God's nature is responsible for the foundations of the universe? You want to tell us about that?
So I was just listening to a debate by John Lennox and Richard Dawkins on has science buried God? And
okay.
I was listening to Dawkins because I actually side with what John Lennox talks about, and what he was saying is what Dawkins said is the universe is simple. It has simple beginnings, right? So I was just thinking about that, and so the moment that the universe sprang into existence, because we can confirm that there was a big bang that took place.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there for a second. For those that don't know, John Lennox is a professor of mathematics, or was a professor. The discussion that Chris is referring to, I think, is the one that happened in 2008, and was between John Lennox and Richard Dawkins. We should point out, John Lennox is a mathematician from Oxford University. Richard Dawkins, also at Oxford University, is a biologist. He's not a physicist. So you've always got to be a little bit concerned when you end up in this situation where you clearly have specialist knowledge in a certain area, like you are, recognized as a scientist. That's fine, which means that you will be able to use the scientific method and try to be on solid ground in your arguments, that kind of thing. But as soon as you start talking about areas of science that are not your specialism, you have to be a little bit cautious about exactly what's said. And I think I've seen quite a few of Richard Dawkins' debates and lectures where he clearly sort of prefaces an awful lot when he's about to make some statement with the fact that, okay, I'm not a physicist. And clearly, when we're looking at physics, ideally, we get the interpretation or the impression or the ideas from a physicist. So I would caution this, but let's move on. I'm going to go forward and back a few seconds so we don't miss any.
Because we can confirm that there was a big bang that took place scientifically, we'll give that to him. So from that point on, there was, initially chaos, and then what sprang about it was order.
Okay, so I'm assuming that Chris is not a scientist, because it sounds like he's reiterating some comments made. There was initially chaos, I'm not quite sure whether the argument once the Big Bang occurred is that it's initially chaos. Basically, the second law of thermodynamics tells us that as time moves forward, the amount of disorder is increasing in the universe. So it would suggest that at the moment just after the Big Bang, because of course we actually don't know about the Big Bang itself, there is an issue that from that point onwards, when the rules of physics or the laws of the universe as we understand them now, when they become relevant, because they're not relevant at the moment of the Big Bang, when they become relevant, which was tiny time afterwards, then disorder has been increasing, order has been decreasing. So that statement is not correct. So again, I'm not trying to throw out Chris's arguments here, although you always worry when someone is putting forward some idea because they've listened to a debate, they've read a book, they've watched a TV program, and it's by scientists, it's a debate between scientists, or it's a book written by a scientist to popularize science in some way, or the video is meant for, you know, the general public. You always worry that there are always simplifications that have to be made in order to make sure that you carry the public forward with you in the program or in the book, or you know, with your arguments in a lecture or a debate. And if you don't do that, if you don't simplify down, then you just lose everybody, or your book doesn't sell, or no one watches the TV program. So you always have to be cautious about things like that.
Yeah, what sprang about it was order. There's certain laws that we can confirm scientifically, and kind of what I was thinking about was, from the moment it sprang into existence, it had to have almost like you can look at it like a genetic like code, you know, like it is what it is, similar to, you know, when you have a child, it is going to be the child is going to be what he is. He's going to be athletic.
Could Chris be more vague here? I'm actually not quite sure. I'm trying to draw a parallel between the birth of a child and the birth of the universe, I think, is a big stretch. But rather than just jumping in and making comments about the fact that he's not actually saying very much at the moment, it's probably not worth it. Let's just wait and let him finish, as the hosts are doing.
The child is going to be what he is. He's going to be athletic. There's just like a number of things that genetically make up that person. So if that makes sense, I'm just trying to like.
Well, so
explain kind of what it. Go ahead.
Can I confirm? So it sounds like you're saying that the universe came from chaos and then it somehow turned to order. Is that the thing you're saying at first, right?
No. So okay, you got to think about. Okay, so when it came into existence, okay, when the Big Bang, because we can confirm the Big Bang scientifically.
No, we can't confirm the Big Bang scientifically. The present models of the Big Bang still have problems. We don't understand the moment of creation. There are certain aspects of the universe that have forced us to invoke certain things. For example, if you look into cosmology, there is a phase called inflation, which I think cosmologists actually are not happy with. It was kind of thrown in there to just try and explain some things that we couldn't explain. I won't go into the detail here. So the model is generally accepted by most astrophysicists as being generally correct. We think that the universe probably did have a beginning and it has expanded from a singularity, but we cannot be 100% certain about that. So again, Chris is talking about things that he doesn't understand. If people would stop doing that, then I think, particularly on issues that are important, where, and by important I mean you're trying to convince somebody of something else. We're all allowed to talk about anything we want, but if you're trying to convince somebody of something like the concept in this particular case of a God existing, you cannot be making part of your argument about stuff that you know nothing about. You're just making statements that you cannot be sure of, that you don't really understand, etc., etc. It's just ridiculous.
When the Big Bang, because we can confirm the Big Bang scientifically, there had to have already been like a genetic, I'll just say genetic, okay, like a DNA of, and then everything that came out from it is what we are. The universe.
Have you heard of determinism?
Laws. What is it?
Have you heard of determinism?
I haven't.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you're suggesting determinism, which I consider myself a determinist, and it can really be defined several different ways, but the way that I define it is that basically everything that happens has a reason, and not that it's like predetermined or anything. It's just that something else happened that caused whatever happened to happen, right? So cause and effect. It sounds like you're kind of looking back and saying, well, there's a reason for everything in that something caused something, which caused something, which caused something. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying what it is almost. It's more of a predetermined.
So where I lose you is
about
when
you go ahead.
Well, so I do believe in, we have to be really careful with semantics here, that things have been predetermined. But are you assuming agency? Are you assuming that there is a mind that has predetermined things separately?
I'm not going to put any label on it, but all I can tell you is that things are rolling out in a way that there seems to be purpose behind it.
So is your I guess your point would be that the purpose behind the creation of the universe is God? Is that what you're? I mean, if we're going to boil it down to what?
No, I'm not. Well, what I'm trying to say is there seems to be some type of. There has to. Okay, so I mean, you guys could take it on. Hey, it just kind of rolled out, and it is the way it is. But there is already something there, and then it's kind of rolled out in the way that it has.
Could Chris be more vague? I'm actually not sure. I think if I was trying to say something, but also at the same time trying not to say anything, he's doing a really good job of it, because he's blithering on here, actually saying nothing. And I would like to just take a pause and just discuss very briefly the issue of determinism. Determinism is this idea of cause and effect, that when something happens, it happens, that's the effect. It happened because there was a cause. Now, most of the time, when this issue of cause and effect is important, it is the way that science is explained. When we teach people about the laws of physics, or in biology or in chemistry, it doesn't really matter which science. We very often, when we're trying to explain why things happen or how they happen, we invoke this idea of determinism. We don't necessarily call it that, but we basically say, it happens because of this. This is the cause, this is the effect. We observe the effect, and we can speculate on what the cause was, that sort of thing. And even if we don't understand the cause, we still think there is a cause. Now, this argument has been valid for hundreds of years, the cause and effect, maybe even thousands of years. But now, physicists do not believe that. Now, I'm not saying that physicists teach it differently, because certainly up to and including sort of pre-university physics, we still talk in the sense of cause and effect. So we kind of lie. But physicists do not actually believe in cause and effect in the same way at all now. Quantum physics has shown us that basically probabilities determine what will happen. When there is some kind of a cause, it does not necessarily produce a specific effect. There is a probability. There are multiple options that could occur, and there is a probability associated with those options. there are two basic quantum mechanical interpretations. One is called the Copenhagen interpretation, and the other one has different names, but can be kind of referred to as the many worlds interpretation. And the Copenhagen interpretation is the idea that if there is a cause which could produce a number of effects, then each of those effects has a probability associated with it. Obviously, if you add up all the probabilities, they add up to 1 if it's correct that something is going to happen. It's just which one of the possible outcomes will happen. And it's almost then like you roll a dice and you just see what the percentage comes out to be, and then that determines what happens. But in the same situation, you could end up with a different effect if you repeated it. If you set up exactly the same situation and you roll the dice again, you could get a different outcome. That's the Copenhagen interpretation, loosely stated. The many worlds interpretation is different, and this is the weird one. The many worlds interpretation, which a lot of physicists now will go with, and certainly the Copenhagen interpretation is not really considered as to be a sensible interpretation of quantum physics. The many worlds interpretation is a really weird one. It requires a mental twist here. In the many worlds interpretation, for a given setup, which will cause a bunch of effects, all with probabilities, so we're the same as Copenhagen at the moment, but here's the difference, and it's a big difference. They all occur. Every single one of them occurs. And this is where you get this idea of the many worlds. And the way that we, with our senses and our instruments, the way that we experience that or interpret that is in whatever the effect is, whatever we experience, whatever we see. That's the way we interpret physically the many worlds options that happen. So I think that really determinism, which is kind of what he's saying here, Jenna's right, is not right. And again, I just kind of fall back, I'm afraid, on the issue that physics in particular does require mental tricks, mental gymnastics to get over some of the quite weird ideas. But if we don't do that, then we find it very difficult to explain the way that the world works. If we don't have quantum mechanics, for example, we cannot really explain how atoms can exist. And that's kind of a big one, because if we can't explain atoms, we've got a problem explaining anything. So quantum mechanics and this concept of probabilities is really important, and it does fly, unfortunately, in the face of determinism. So this whole conversation has a basis which is false and incorrect, and those two things mean the same. It's incorrect, and therefore we're sort of like blowing in the wind here, and nothing's going to come of this, I'm afraid.
Something there, and then it's kind of rolled out in the way that it has.
So that's where you lose me. Why would we assume that there was something already there?
Well, so you don't agree that there was a Big Bang that took place?
I didn't say that. I was just asking, why would we assume that there was something already there when all this happened?
Because it's rolled out in the way that it has. It was already before determined that it was going to be what it is now.
And you said there's some kind of a purpose or determination behind that. There's something behind the bang or the creation. Is that
okay? So the way that I can connect the purpose to what it is you have to look at us human beings and see that we have these intrinsic things inside of us, a sense of purpose, justice, and these things cannot be overlooked. You have to take them because...
Okay, it sounds like Chris is now diving a sense of purpose, of justice. I was almost going to jump in with "and the American way," because it's kind of sounds like a quote from Superman. But Yeah, I don't know what he's getting at exactly, but I think he's getting at the argument of morals, of the fact that, your conscience, you know what's kind of right. We get those things from God. I think the way that the Christians refer to it is, the morals that we have are written on our heart by God. So I think that's what he's referring to.
Well,
Be overlooked. You have to take them because
well, no,
came
I
about
think
from
you're
that.
assuming
Go ahead.
you're assuming things that aren't given. I mean, when you say we have to have we have a sense of purpose. What do you how do you know that? What do you mean by
Right.
that? What is my sense of purpose?
Okay, so you don't have that in you.
Well,
No,
that's the thing is,
you're the one that's saying
I'm
I
turning the
do.
question around to you.
No, you can't do that.
Well-
You're the one that said we have a purpose, and I'm asking you to define that and tell me why you think we have a purpose. Don't tell me to explain why I don't. You're the one that said
Okay.
I do.
So okay,
That's
you-
called shifting the
well,
burden of proof.
I mean, if you look around at all the books that are on shelves, okay, like what is the key thing that people discuss? It's self-improvement. It's
whoa.
to better
No,
your
not
life.
really.
Everybody has
No,
these
there's
things,
all kinds
like
of-
on the first of
okay.
every year, they want to improve so there's that sense of purpose. I want to improve myself.
I think literally Chris is just making it up as he goes along. There are lots and lots of people who are also self-destructive.
I know a lot of people
so-
who aren't. I know a lot of people aren't trying to improve themselves every year.
Mhm.
That's a bold assumption. That's a broad assumption that you've made that everybody wants to improve themselves every year. That's just
Not
bull.
What is it called? Wasn't it called
Okay,
when
so
there's?
you're
I think
saying
there's a
You're
fallacy
saying
that
the majority of people don't. Go ahead.
I think that there's a fallacy where it's like you're assigning your own ideas and your own desires on other people. You're assuming that, well, since I feel this way, everybody must feel this way. And that sounds like a really, really big leap.
Yeah, and
Okay,
also
so
you
you're
would-
telling
would
me- Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you could respond to Jenna. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, that's all right. I'm just saying that. Okay, if you take the entire population of people, you don't think that the majority of them, if they see somebody commit, like this is kind of moving into morality, but if you see them, let's say,
This is not going to go anywhere.
some type of sexual crime, they're gonna frown down on that specific thing.
Well, where did that
Majority
come
of
from?
people, there's going to be a few that are.
That is, I mean, Chris now is talking absolute rubbish. He's basically saying that I'll say the same thing. Do you think that if we saw some terrible crime going on in front of us, that you would be unhappy about it? Well, of course I would. And if virtually everybody in the world saw this, then the vast majority would be unhappy with that crime, whatever the crime is. Of course. But that's because we have feelings, and when people commit crimes, why shouldn't they commit that crime on me? Why will I assume it will stop there? This is why we have laws. This is why we have to create laws for society to work within. Nobody would like to have rules that control us. The problem is that people don't always follow sensible, obvious rules. So we have to create them for them, and there has to be a sanction when people break them. This is just talking rubbish now.
Kind of a big thing. Okay.
Well,
the majority of people, there's going to be a few that are kind of.
But we're not hitting science here now, I think, so I'm just going to stop interrupting.
Something by saying the majority of people, because the majority of people believe in some kind of a God. What difference does that make to me? That doesn't make me want to say, well, there must be a God if the majority of people believe in one.
Go ahead.
It's confirmation bias. Okay. And so if you say the majority of people feel like they need to have a sense of purpose and want to improve their lives every year, that's not assigning some kind of divine purpose to our human existence. You're making a bold leap there.
Yeah, and going off of what you said, you started off your statement by saying, well, I think. And so I think that's where you lose me, because what you and I think.
No,
Hold on.
think
Let me finish,
it's-
please. What I don't
go
think
ahead.
that what you and I think necessarily determines what's real in any way, and that's why we've tried to use the scientific method of verifying and making sure. Well, is this what do you call it? Oh my God, what's the word?
Do we have evidence?
Falsifiable, right? We have to make sure, because what I think can be wrong, and it has been wrong in the past. Everybody thinks things that are wrong. Do you agree with that?
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
But you know, the thing is, see, you're trying to build a structure of, like, when we observe something, we're making observations and making correct, what's the word? You know, like, you're looking at something and determining something, okay? So it's like...
Assuming something, maybe?
I kind of got off topic. I kind of got off topic from the very beginning, okay? Because at the beginning of what I was talking about is critical, is...
Well, state your main
when
point.
everything started to come...
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, what I'm trying to say, I mean, I don't want to deter you from other callers, but I'm just saying,
come on.
From the initial point, things have rolled out the way they are. There seems to be, like, I'll just say DNA that has order, the laws, everything is, you know, us, you know, that we have all these needs and core things inside of us for, like, sense of justice, all these things. But all I'm trying to, like, when you say the mind thing, if you don't think that there's a purpose behind it, then why would I trust whatever observation or conclusion you're drawing from an observation? Does that make sense?
Why would we trust what you're saying when you're starting off saying this seems to be? Like, is there a way to verify all these things that you're assuming?
I'm just trying to I'm not assuming anything. All I'm just saying.
Well, when you say there seems to be purpose, that's an assumption, correct?
Okay.
Do you agree?
I'm just saying that.
Do you agree that when you say the words, there seems to be...
You and I...
Chris,
do you agree that when you start a statement with there seems... Okay,
we're both talking. Chris, listen a minute and let Jen ask the question. Hang on.
Do you agree that when you start a sentence with the words there seems to be, that may not be true, that we would have to investigate that further to verify that it actually is? I believe that when you say there seems to be something, that's an assumption.
Okay. All right. I agree.
Okay. So then, so you're assuming things, because I've heard you say that several times. And so you are making assumptions. So I was just wondering, how do we verify these things that you're saying seem to be?
Okay. Well, because there's a lot of things that I've talked about. So can you narrow it down to what you're asking me? Because
you can pick. You can pick the one that has the strongest evidence of something that seems to be, whether it's there seems to be that we have a purpose, or there seems to be that we all want self-help, or whatever it is that you think you have the strongest case for. Let's look at that.
Okay, so from the beginnings, you guys didn't. Do you think that these foundational particles that have made us, the world, everything to come to be, is by chance? Do you think that's, or do you think
I don't think that answers my question at all.
Okay.
Let me ask you something, Chris. So I let me tell you where I'm at in terms of a creator or an origin of us here. I don't know how we got here. I don't believe that there is a God that created the world and or me, because I don't see any evidence of such. And so I just take the position that I don't know how we got here. And I trust evolution and the experts. I trust the scientists and the experts who know more than I do about that.
Evolution, see, that's another thing. Evolution is you're just explaining the mechanism. You're not talking about why.
Let me
you understand what I'm
finish. Let me
Go ahead.
finish. Thank you. So my point is, I don't know. And so I don't jump from I don't know to must be God, or must be something behind it, or must be a purpose, must be a reason. So let me ask you, since I'm telling you what I think about these things, what is your opinion of a God, or an creator, a designer, intelligent designer, a God, a beginning, or whatever you want to call it? What is your opinion of that?
Well, I don't think that he's okay. I'll just, because I'm going to take the theist. I'm taking the theist position.
Why don't you take your own position?
Theist. He's.
Oh,
Well,
are you saying that you're theist? You're
I'm
saying
just telling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because I do believe that there's a mind, because I don't think that these things occurred from just a naturalistic, there's genetic. If you think about it, when you have a child, that child becomes what it was already determined from the very beginning what they were going to be. The universe is the same thing.
Okay, you keep saying that, and I don't know that there's no evidence for that, Chris.
You keep saying I think, and there seems to be. So from the get-go, when you're saying it seems to be that this child has been determined from the beginning, how do we verify that? How do we verify any of it?
How do you verify that?
Yeah.
You look at the child once it's grown up, because from the
and
moment,
say because this happened, that means that it was always going to happen. And not only that, but that means that there was a mind that decided that this was going to happen. Correct? So it seems like a lot of leaps, a lot of there seems to be a lot of I think this, and so instead of going with just hold on, instead of just
then you're going to call me arrogant if I say I know,
Chris.
Okay.
Chris. So instead of just going with these assumptions as if we have verified them, I'm just saying let's take a moment before we continue this thought process and actually verify them.
Well, because I know that you're trying to trap me. Because if I say I know,
wow, so that's an assumption
arrogant.
right there that I think deserves. Oh my God, Dave, how do you feel about this call? Because apparently we're trying to trap someone.
Chris, you keep dancing all around the issue here, and I'm going to cut to the chase here. You identified yourself as a theist, and so you therefore think that there's a God behind the creation of things and the creation of humanity and mankind. I'm curious what you think about that God's involvement with us now. Let's assume for a minute that there is a God who started this thing, and give you that. Now what? Yep. What is he doing? What is it doing? What difference does it make?
Well, we have these core foundational, the morality. We have the sense of justice. All these things.
That's society.
Well,
that's
when you say
cultural, that's society. No.
Okay.
Howard,
we're here to love each other and to have relationships with one another.
And we don't need a God. God doesn't help us do that. A God doesn't help us do that. The Christian biblical God sure didn't. So we keep going around the same mountain here, and I don't think we're getting anywhere with this. I don't know about you, Jenna, but I think probably since he thinks we're trying to trap him, maybe we can.
We'll let you go. We'll
let him go.
The embarrassment of getting trapped. How about that? Okay, so we don't want to by any means trap you. Jeez.
Okay, just before we move on, this idea of, I'm going to be very cautious and not kind of say anything, because I think that every question that you ask me is trying to trap me. If you're trying to speak honestly about something, there's no need to be worried about things like traps. If someone takes you down a logical process that ends up with you having to question what you believe, and you would consider that, they walked me into a trap. Well, if it's genuine, if the logical process that someone is taking you down does put you into a corner where your ideas don't quite work, then if you like, okay, you were put into a trap. But the point is, you were placed into a position where you have to now start questioning your beliefs. And there's nothing wrong with that. The danger becomes when people start arguing and they lead you down a route based on flawed logic. Then that's not good, not right. That's a deliberate trap, which is not a very strong trap, but you may not see the flaws in the little argument they used against you. That would be wrong, and that's what people would be worried about, I think. But genuinely answering honestly, with all the appropriate caveats that are needed as we discuss our views, because our views are very personal, of course, by definition. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't avoid answering questions because you feel it's a trap. See where it goes. You're not lessened by questioning your views and your thoughts and your feelings and your opinions. This is a good thing, not a bad thing.
You know, we try to have honest dialogue. We try to actually figure out the epistemology of why people...
We couldn't get him to identify anything. He kept hedging everything, and he wouldn't come out and say, I think God started it all. I think he was just afraid to say that. He was afraid that we were trying to trap him into saying that God did it. And
well, if he thinks that, why is that a trap?
Because then he knows he doesn't have any evidence to show that God did it. That's the problem.
I don't know. So it doesn't seem like a very honest caller. If you're going to start a call assuming that we're going to be dishonest, then why talk to us?
Yeah, we're trying to have an honest conversation. State your case plainly and then back it up. That's all we ask people.
Okay. So how about, what do you think of Hank in Texas? Says, why can't I take the final step to atheism? Hi Hank. I'm with Jenna and Dave.
Hey Hank.
Is it Jenna? Did I get that right?
Jenna, yes sir.
What was the question?
Okay, I try to remember my wife's name most of the time, but at my age it can be difficult.
Awesome. Okay, so what do you want to call about?
Guys, you kind of got the gist of it. I started out being raised in a Christian home also, and in my late teens, early 20s, I struggled when I, came to reading the Bible and looking at it and saying, what it says is not seem to be what I'm being taught. And it was a traumatic experience, as I think it is for a lot of people, to back away from that. Yeah. But in the end, when it comes down to it, there seems to be one thing that is not associated with the physical, at least that I've really looked into, because this is the thing that confuses me the most. So that's why I called to get your thoughts on it. And that is consciousness. It doesn't seem to be associated with anything physical, like anything in the mind that they found that.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there for a second. I will go back 5 seconds, I think it is, for when I restart. But consciousness is something that keeps coming up. There's a lot of stuff on it. There is actually no need for Hank to bring this up, but of course people do bring up the same questions over and over and over and over and over again. So if you just typed consciousness into YouTube, or just like Atheist Experience space consciousness, you would get lots and lots and lots of moments where this has been discussed ad infinitum. And I think the general argument seems to be, where does consciousness come from? What is consciousness? Which is something that I think we would still sort of argue over the fine detail of that particular question. And where does it come from? If you have the creation of a human being from a single cell that starts multiplying, and clearly a single cell doesn't have consciousness, is not conscious. But at some point, the creature that we become is conscious. Where does that come from? Is it purely biochemistry? Now, the reality is that we don't know the answer to that question. And it may well be biochemistry. But the point is, we don't know. We're talking about something that is difficult to define, that people will argue about the definition of consciousness and where it comes from. And it's another one of these situations where theists will basically argue that here's a question, the answer is really, I don't know, therefore God. Now, this seems like a really weird one, this consciousness thing, because consciousness, the argument that is generally used by theists is that consciousness can't just appear. Consciousness in us has come from the universe, has consciousness. If you look at my other posts, you will see that one of them is consciousness a conserved quantity, where I discuss this in some detail. But there is no evidence, there is nothing that says that consciousness as a property of a person, whatever that means, it can appear as a consequence of the scientific process, if you like. And it wasn't there before, and now it is. The argument is, well, that's not possible. Well, there's nothing that says that's not possible. And we don't need to invoke the concept of a God to do that. If we wanted to do that, then we'd have to talk about what consciousness is. We'd need a much better opinion, a clear view on what consciousness is. And we'd also need a clear view on why we don't see consciousness anywhere other than in thinking creatures. And yet somehow it's getting into us. And how does that process work? And the answer is, of course, there's no evidence for that. And so it is difficult to see how that is in any way possible to do research on. So this is a discussion that has been had many times, and sadly, I don't think will go anywhere other than a fallacy.
Physical, like anything in the mind that they found, at least to this point, that says, oh, this is consciousness. This is what lets you know that you are you.
Isn't that fascinating?
So what are your thoughts on it?
Dave, you want to go
Yes,
first?
it is fascinating.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is fascinating because it's something that I honestly understand how we know who we are, and we're aware of ourselves, and that self-awareness that some people have more than others, obviously. But it doesn't. To me, it doesn't make an argument for or against a God of any kind. It is just simply something that we're still coming to understand as science progresses, as we learn more about the human body, about the human mind. I mean, I think we can recognize that there's advances being made all the time, that we're learning more and more about who we are and how we operate and what our bodies and minds are capable of. The human consciousness is one thing that I think is like Jenna said, it is fascinating, but what that says or doesn't say about a God, to me, that's not part of the conversation.
Yeah. So, do you want to respond to that, or do you want to hear my thoughts first? Up to you, Hank.
No, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So yeah, exactly what he said. I think when I find something, a topic like that I'm like, oh my God, this just doesn't make sense, I try to look into it as far as I can. And if it becomes like really, really important to me and I just can't figure it out, I maybe become a scientist that's looking into consciousness, because the fact is that it doesn't look like we have many answers about why consciousness, it's very hard to describe, and I haven't found much on it, and I find that a fascinating topic. And so that's one of the reasons that I want to look into science in several different areas. It's mind-blowing to me. But the thing is, just because I can't figure it out, or I don't know, or I can't find the answers, doesn't mean that I can just fill in the blank with any kind of assumption about what must be. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I'm not trying to say that it proves there's a God or anything. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to say that seems to be the one thing that, and I also realize that we're learning things all the time, and maybe something will come up, but I can't. It's still, to me, it's that one thing that says this doesn't appear to be something that's physical like everything else. So if I have a consciousness, to some extent, it kind of seems above the physical or supernatural or something. So if I'm thinking that, and I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying I can't get away from, if I'm thinking that, where did that come from? And maybe there is something about the supernatural that can't be explained. I just don't understand. Or maybe we'll find out someday that what part of the brain does tell us this is you and you are aware of who you are.
It's interesting that he snuck the word supernatural into that. Supernatural, I think, is a slightly tricky subject in that supernatural, to me, is a reference to something that happened against the laws of physics or the laws of the universe, and we have no evidence that happens, none whatsoever. So I'd rather not sneak that word in.
So when you say things like something above what's the physical or supernatural, right? Those sound like terms that I've heard in church and other places, and it sounds so. When you hear those terms over and over and over again, I think that, and this could be wrong, but I think that kind of gets buried in your subconscious to where it just kind of becomes like foundational, something that you just know without actually having to do the work of actually verifying. So when you use terms like above or supernatural, help me analyze this. What are you actually literally saying when you use those words? Because that helped me, is really investigating the terminology down to the T, helped me kind of get over the concept that I just think those are kind of fluffy words, you know?
Well, maybe I should try to say, without being argumentative, I am aware the word supernatural sounds like, well, you're leaving science or something. But I'm also trying to say I am open to the possibility there is something besides the physical. I'm not saying we've shown that or that there certainly haven't proved it or anything, and it doesn't look like there is.
Well, I mean, there's conceptual ideas. Their numbers are conceptual. You know, there are things other than the physical, but are we going to assume that there's like a physical evidence of the number 4? No, I mean, it's something that we've called to have communication with each other, to relay what we're trying to say to one another. I don't think that means that it actually exists. So when you say supernatural, what are you saying? Because I can describe the number 4. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But what is supernatural? What does that mean?
Well, I'm just saying that the number 4 exists because we make it in our mind. I mean, there's a location in our brain that identifies with the number 4.
So what am I identifying with the word supernatural?
I just use that as a term that I don't know how to say.
I think we're on the right track. I think he's on the right track.
Yeah, I think what Jenna meant when you say the word supernatural is it's part of your vocabulary that you learned as a Christian or that you learned in church or that you kind of grew up with. It. We all do. I mean, by definition, the word supernatural means beyond natural. It's beyond the natural explanation of things.
I could really like him to investigate in his own mind what that actually means. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're on the right track. When you say, well, I don't really know, that sounds right. Do you know? Do you actually know what you're saying to me when you say that something is supernatural?
Maybe supernatural is not the right word. I'm using that word to say there's been no identification of the consciousness with something physical.
So
I'd like a definition of what he means by physical, because the brain is where it appears our consciousness resides. There is no evidence of consciousness from any creature that doesn't have a brain. or if the brain dies, there's no evidence that consciousness then continues. Once again, that's, consciousness is not a conserved quantity.
What does that mean?
Well,
That means that when we think about things, like when we laugh, when we talk about things, there are places in our brain that scientists look at and say, oh, that's how you identify faces, things like that. There's no place in the brain that scientists have looked at, researchers have looked at and identified, and somehow come up with, this is how you know you're who you are, that you're alive, that you're aware of yourself. And I think that would be difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible.
I need a buzzer for every time somebody will start talking about something they don't know anything about. Hank is not a biologist or a neuroscientist, so he does, with the statement he's just made, he does not know. He's quoting somebody or just speculating, but he doesn't know, and he's not a scientist working on the brain. And even if we're blank about it, we don't know. That again, that doesn't mean that in 10 years time we won't know, or in 100 years time we won't know.
I just think that's going to be difficult because it's almost like a vague concept itself to some extent, seems like.
Well, let me ask you this, Hank. You kind of started the call by saying that issue of consciousness and the things we don't understand about it are kind of keeping you lingering in the ideology or the mindset of there must be something out there, there must be a God of some kind. Is that what I heard you saying in some way?
To some extent, I guess if you want to call it God, find something that is not identified or controlled or by physical.
Yeah.
So why would we assume it
Adam.
exists?
I'm not assuming
Oh,
that
okay.
anything
So
exists.
you don't
You're
think
just
it exists?
asking the question. I'm with you, Hank. I kind of, like when we started, we all said, yeah, that's a fascinating concept, the consciousness and things like that. But those ideas and those questions that we don't have answers for right now, or that I don't understand because I'm not that sharp, is those kind of questions don't keep me from letting go of the idea of God, because I don't see anything in my understanding of God. In all those years I was a Christian, there was certainly nothing in the Bible that identified those things or that explained those things. I mean, in the Bible, they thought they didn't even know that how the universe worked, and the sun that we rotated, the sun rotated around. They thought the earth was flat. They didn't know how germs worked. They didn't know anything. And if there was some God consciousness in the mix there, way back when men were writing down the words that became the Bible, I think they would have put that in there, or they should have. But Jesus thought, an epileptic had a demon, and so those kind of things. So I don't let those kind of questions keep me hanging on to some idea of God or Christianity just because I don't have the answer, therefore God. I mean, those are the kind of things that get us in trouble when we come to questions that we have that we don't have answers for, and then we fill in the blank with some kind of a God.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that, Dave. I follow
I know
the
you're not.
same path.
I know you're not. Go ahead.
I am only saying that everything else that I can think of, even if I don't understand it, everything else I can see where, yeah, this could be, say, part of how the brain works or something like that. I don't see how this can be part of how the brain works.
So what does that mean?
Maybe we'll find that it is.
What does that mean then, if we can't find that?
But again, what Hank has just said is a perfect example of the problems that people have from the fact that they look at a situation and they can't conceive of an answer. therefore the danger is God. The fact that you can't conceive of an answer. I mean, just think about the number of times in your life when you just, you read a book, or you read a newspaper or a comic or so, and you come across a problem or a question, like a crossword puzzle, or some kind of word puzzle, a number puzzle, or you play one of these computer games that basically is a whole bunch of puzzles. Well, okay, so you meet a puzzle and you can't think of the answer. You don't say therefore God. I'll just say, when I see the crossword puzzle and I can see the clue, I just write, and it's like 6 letters and I don't know what it is. So what I'll do is I'll just say it's God, because that's 6 letters. I mean, it's just not the way that we do it. When you come across a problem, a question that you can't answer, an idea that doesn't seem to make sense, you don't then say therefore, because I can't think of anything else, I can't think of a solution, I'll go to the the creator idea. It's just not the way that it's sensible to work. It's not rational.
What does that mean?
Maybe we'll find that it is.
What does that mean then, if we can't find that?
If that is true, I'm not saying it is. I'm saying if that is true, to me, that brings in the question of, is there something besides the physical?
And what if it's not true? What if we just haven't found it yet?
Then it's not.
So where are we then on that? Do we assume
when I have that question?
So do we assume that it is, or do we assume that it isn't, or do we just stop and say, well, we don't know yet?
I'm going to move on, I think.
I
think we've exhausted this.
I don't know yet, but it's something that I can't explain.
All right, let's do Jan, or I hope I'm saying that name right. Jan in, I don't know where that stands for.
Newcastle.
I'm sorry?
Newcastle.
Newcastle, awesome. Okay. It says you want to talk about the impossibility of picking a philosophy or religion?
Yes, the impossibility of, because I always say, when they ask me, are you a Christian or not, I say, well, I'm not qualified to pick a religion. I have no understanding about religion, so it's impossible for me to make a fair assessment of any religion to pick one, or philosophy, in a sense. I mean, what qualifications what qualifications do I have to know the difference between even, let's say, a Presbyterian and a Methodist? And why would I choose one over the other? What would be my basis of rational thought if I were a Christian to pick one? Or an Anabaptist versus a Baptist, Catholic versus Gnostic, whatever religious philosophies that are out there. How do I determine even, what God is? I mean, if I determine I am a theist, what determines which God is right? Is Zeus? Is Apollo? Are any of the gods that have been defined outside my realm of reasonable responsibility to actually be able to evaluate and pick one?
All right, let's talk to Chris in Cali. He wants to talk about the meaning of agnostic, right?
Yeah. Hello?
Hi, Chris. You're on with Jen and Dave.
Hey, Chris.
Oh, wow. Hey, thanks for taking me. And hi, Dave. We've talked once, I believe. And Jenna, I'm not sure, but hi.
Hi.
Agnostic.
Good to see you.
Okay, well, let's start with this. I am a pure agnostic.
Okay, do you want to tell us what that means to you?
I don't really believe there's a God, really. I mean, in whatever sense people think there's a God. I don't believe there's not a God, or whatever the other one is. I'm not an atheist or a theist.
So what do you think an atheist is?
An atheist is not convinced that there's proof that there's a God or something like that.
So that sounds like exactly what you said you are. Correct?
Oh.
That just by what you said, that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I don't know. Oh, okay. I don't know.
The terms.
I'm not seeing it.
Let me help you. My definition for me is I'm an agnostic atheist. Those terms are not mutually exclusive. Agnostic just simply means you don't know. Gnosis.
Right.
Gnosis.
Right.
Agnostic is I don't know. Atheist is a response to the claim of theism. And so when I say I don't know, I'm just saying I don't know, because the reality is none of us know. We have ideas of what we believe and think based upon our experiences, based upon evidence that we see. So my experience and evidence says I don't see evidence for a God. So I take the position that in that framework, I'm an atheist, but I'm also agnostic because I just don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure whether it's completely clear or not. Agnosticism and atheism are two different things. Agnosticism is about knowledge. Do you know that there is a God? And that normally carries a burden of proof associated with evidence. So do we actually know for sure, based upon evidence, whatever kind of evidence, I guess? As a scientist, obviously, I'd like something that's scientific because that's the best kind of evidence. Do I know for sure that a God exists? And the answer is no. I don't know whether a God does exist or does not exist. So based on knowledge, I don't know. So I'm agnostic. Atheism is about belief. So agnosticism is about knowledge, atheism is about belief. If you have no evidence that a God exists, the next question is, so do you think a God exists? And the answer to that can be yes or no. I don't see evidence that a God exists, and therefore I choose to believe that there is no such thing as a God. You are an agnostic atheist. The alternative is, do you believe that there is evidence for a God existing? No. So do you believe in a God? Yes. But not based on evidence, because there isn't any. I would believe in God based on faith. It is a belief, not based on evidence. Which means, of course, in part, that means it's not rational. So you can be an agnostic theist. Someone who does believe in a God, but accepts the fact there is no evidence.
But I'm also agnostic because I just don't know. Does that make sense?
A little bit. It gets. I kind of jotted down some of the points that we might have come to eventually, but it sounded like the thing to establish is what a theist is. I don't know that definition all that well.
I thought we could talk to David. I don't know if he goes by Dave, but David in California says Deity Dave Warnock's hypothetical rape controversy. You want to talk about rape controversy?
I didn't know I had a hypothetical rape controversy. Let's go with it.
Dave, you there? David, you there? You're on with Jenna and Dave.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Hey,
Do you want
David.
to talk about this? How do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I just want to refresh Dave's memory because I called to talk about the omniscience of Jesus when he was with Kenny Lenny.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ken
Kenny
Flunder.
Lenny, I like that.
Yeah.
And then you guys dragged me down another path. I felt like Little Red Riding Hood going down the path of
Okay.
morality.
Oh, okay. Well.
So where did this
All
path
right.
take you?
Well, so that was, the discussion was about the morality, and I think I got hung up on, I can't remember.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of went off there.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Dave. So we've got Eric in Georgia. You've been waiting a really long time. Thank you so much. And it says you're becoming sober as an atheist, and he said you wanted to talk to me about it. Hi, Eric. You're on with Jen and Dave.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, how are you guys? I'm glad to glad to have both of you. I've actually talked to both of you on Facebook. You're the only guys from the ACA I've really chatted with, but other than Eric, but he'll talk to anybody.
Thanks for reaching out. I know it's really, really hard to get sober.
Yeah, and I heard you talk to you a little bit about it. Put out the disclaimer, that any way you can get sober if you want to, you should take that, whether it's religious or secular or whatever. But I went in at the beginning of this year into a rehab that I thought was non-religious, and because that's what I asked, and I realized I was asking the wrong question, because it wasn't religious, but it was full of God. And I know, Jimmy, you might have had some experience with AA. I'm not sure about you, Dave, but I think I offered to buy you a beer if you were in Georgia before I was sober.
Okay, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to move on to the next one, because I'm sure that Eric has got a fantastic story to tell, but there's no science in this bit, so I'm just going to move forward.
All right, you want to talk to, we've got Thomas in Ohio. Thank you so much for waiting. You're saying that humans are the image of God and therefore are gods. That's an interesting perspective. You want to talk about that? You're on with Jenna and Dave.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Thomas.
Okay, I'm just going to, before this one starts, going to kind of take a stab in the dark and say that I don't see this ending well. This sounds like rubbish. This sounds like one of these sort of points, comments, questions, however it's meant to be, which is ridiculous, and not quite sure why anybody would go with this, because it's just frankly a little bit stupid. But okay, let's see. I might be completely wrong. It might be absolutely great.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that kind of, if you can understand it, it kind of, I run into problems being a theist with other theists because of the conventional understanding of that, of God being an abstract being. I also, at the same time, I understand atheism, but I also don't believe it exists, because here's the thing is, what I understand deity is, and this comes from the Bible, and I understand the definition in Webster's, is that us just being humans, whether we're theists or atheists, like, we can't help but be what a deity is. And so, for me, like, science doesn't disprove a God, logic is...
Not quite sure I understand that. God doesn't disprove a God logic. Not quite sure I follow that. Let's see where it goes.
Really work out all the time. And my overall point is that we emanate deity, human beings. And I can break it down, like, so if I could kind of change the definition, which I don't know if allowed, of God, and use another term, which is humanity. Who is humanity? Is it the person, and while listening to the show, say someone's doing something wrong, and they're the type that would do something wrong. It's like, that's an aspect of us that comes out. And there's another aspect of us that says, we can't do that. We need to stop this, and this doesn't work out. And, like, just basically within nature itself, we humans prove, in my mind, that a God exists. And therefore, whether you claim to be a theist,
okay, so we prove that a God exists. There's, interestingly, Thomas used the word logic earlier. Not seeing any of it here.
Just real quick, like, I don't believe that all theists are theists and all atheists are actually atheists when we break down reality in terms of behavior. Now, the creation of the sun, that's a whole different, that has nothing to do with, in my opinion, us as a deity. However, we can learn and this and that.
Okay, I think this is pretty rubbish from Thomas. Don't see where this is going, but there's no science here. So again, I'm going to move on to the next one.
We've got Robert in Texas. Says that you want to share religious experience that you've had for years and you hope it's convincing evidence for God. So you're on with Jen and Dave. I'm going to let you start. Robert.
Right, okay. I'm going to take a guess that, as I've said at other times, that the big issue here will be two words that theists seem to hate, which is evidence and fact. So let's see.
Hey, Robert, you're on.
Hello?
Hi there.
Yes.
You're on with Jen and Dave.
All right. Well, I just wanted to share an experience that I had. It's a sad experience for me, but I think the God or the Holy Spirit is trying to tell you this so you would know. Basically,
okay.
Yeah, this is an experience that I had, which is that I actually blasphemed the Holy Ghost. I don't know if you're aware with that passage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I did that.
Every sin can be forgiven except the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which can't be forgiven. But try to summarize, Robert. Try to summarize your experience really fast for us, please.
Yes, very quickly.
Yes. Yeah, basically, all my life, I believed that there was a God. All my life. I didn't know which God, but I knew, like, just looking at everything, there has to be a God. That's what I always thought. But
So do you have any evidence?
I kept living with my life. No, I had no evidence. I just saw
No evidence.
nature.
You just felt like there had to be. Okay.
There must be a God. And
So-
then, I just kept living my life because, I mean, like, everyone has normal lives. And just kept living in sin. I didn't know about it until God told me, and He wanted me to tell me He is God. And how it happened is that
Interesting. If God's a he.
made me believe I had cancer, and I didn't. I had for weeks pale stool, and I thought I had pancreatic cancer and I was gonna die. So, and I thought I don't know. I believed in God, but I knew that there was no afterlife for some reason, and I think that was the devil trying to, like, blind me. Like, how can you believe in a God but no afterlife? I just didn't, like, it didn't make sense. And basically, he was trying me to pull me towards him so I can accept him. And when I knew that, I searched up how to go to heaven and said that well, you have to give your life to Jesus and you have to turn from all your wicked ways and like that. And I was like, dang, I don't want to do that. I was like, I don't want to.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, Robert. I'm gonna have to cut you off. You've said a whole lot, and oh my God, you're breaking my heart. I'm so sorry for all of this, for thinking that you had cancer and you were gonna die. I'm so sorry for that. And again, since I'm sorry, I really hesitate to cut you off, but we really need to summarize this. And so what I'm curious about is this experience that you had, this terrible experience. How is that evidence for a God?
There's no evidence because God doesn't want to give evidence. If God shows
So why do you believe that there is one?
Because why do I believe?
That's a pretty weak argument. There is no evidence because God doesn't want to give evidence, but God does expect us to follow. God does expect us to tithe, etc., etc. So that's just, I mean, I'm not sure that could be weaker, and that's just not the way that we move forward in life, trying to make advancements, trying to not be deceived, trying to always be rational. This methodology is based on evidence, and that is just the antithesis of it. So it's, I suppose, in a way, it's a good way to end. I'm going to remind you all that we can we can watch the whole of the episode if you go to the Atheist Experience. All of the sort of the phone-ins that weren't anything to do with science. I left enough at the beginning, I hope, to potentially pique your interest if you want to. But the aim of this is to try and spread a little happiness through science. And as we finish now, can I please, as usual, remind everybody to stay safe, stay healthy, get plenty of sleep, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.